It's o'clock. Let's get the meeting started. Good evening. Welcome to the Health, Welfare, and Building Regulations Committee meeting. Diane, can you take a roll call of council members present, please?
Yes, sir. Creamer? Greg?
Diane, I think they're all muted.
Yeah, Mark, you have everybody muted.
Yeah, I just unmuted him.
Thank you. Let's start over again. Creamer?
Present.
Greg?
Present.
And Kane? Hearn Kane? Lewis?
Present.
Littman?
Here, I also see Mr. Hearn.
Yeah, I see him also. I marked him as present.
Okay, thank you.
Littman?
Here,
Lombardi?
Here.
Sloots?
Here.
Starrett?
Here.
And Theron.
Present.
Roll call of 9 present.
Thank you. Can you take roll call for administration present, please?
Yes, sir. Mayor Kathy Catazero Perry.
Good evening, everyone.
Safety Service Director Barb Sylvester. Auditor Jane Ferraro. Chief Deputy Auditor Debbie Bonk. Chief Deputy Auditor Stephanie Myers. Law Director Justin Richard. Chief Counsel Bill Bartos. Chief Engineer David Kroc. Chief Engineer Jason Popeil. Community Development Director Samantha Walters. Economic Development Director David Maley.
Present.
Parks and Rec Director Steve Pedro. Police Chief Keith Mosier.
Present.
Fire Chief Tom Burgasser. Income Tax Budget Director Lori Kataguiri-Waron. Is there anyone else from administration I might have missed? Roll call is complete, Jamie.
Thank you.
Mhm.
For the record, the first meeting,
You're getting a lot of feedback, Jamie.
I sure am. Is everybody muted?
Not at the present.
User number 10 is feedback. So
There you go. Okay, let me repeat that. For the first 30 minutes, the public will not be permitted to speak. Thank you. This meeting is to talk about the request made by economic developer David Maley to amend Chapter 1330 to revise rental registration agreements or requirements for the city of Massillon. Now, I know council members want to speak about this issue, and as the chairperson, I will call on committee members first, and if time permits, I will call on the rest of council. Thank you. Getting to the request made by David Maley. He wants to add a annual registration fee of $80 per unit. Also, having it for first reinspection for violations, if they're not corrected, $50, $100 for the second, and subsequent re-inspections, $150. Now, I spoke to some landlords over the last week, and their concerns were where this money's going to. One landlord said he didn't have a problem paying an annual fee, but he'd like to see the money go towards maybe fixing roads or something like that. I think that $80 is probably, in my opinion, not the right number. I was thinking maybe an initial registration of $40 or $50, and then every year after having a $25 annual fee. And that's as long as they continue to register and are in good standing with the city. I know I spoke to Mark Lombardi, who has some questions and some comments he'd like to make. Mark, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Slutz. I too have heard from several landlords and tenants as well that are concerned with this legislation, mainly because of the annual registration and the fee that was proposed. I think we as a council have to look at, there are landlords who are out there following the rules. And I think when we throw an $80 annual registration fee per unit, we're punishing those who are following the rules, and those who aren't following the rules are getting away, scot-free in a lot of these cases. I do believe that we do need to do something to keep our landlords on track. $80 per unit per year is a little much. I think that's more of a negotiable part of this legislation. I'm thinking $30 per unit, I think would be plenty. However, Councilwoman Sterrett in our last work session even suggested a graduated type of fee structure. And I'm not sure, how that would work or anything for the city, but, it's something I think we might want to consider. A property owner in my own ward contacted me and suggested a structure such as a landlord license fee, and then basing it on the number of units owned, such as a single unit would be $30 annual renewal, 2 to 10 units, maybe $80. These are just figures I just threw into here to give us a structure. 11 to 20 units, $130, and it goes up as their unit numbers increase. I think our top priority here, if we do impose something like this, our top priority in the compliance department then becomes to track down the 12 to 1,700 properties that are unregistered. Doing so under today's fee schedule, could generate $85,000 to $110,000. That's an immediate solution to getting the properties, to getting all of the landlords and the properties registered. And then we could also hold them accountable and impose fees for those who aren't registered. And I mean, there's already a law in the books that they have to register, and if they haven't, we should be able to impose fees for the late registration. Another suggestion came in by one of the property owners to impose a bed tax for those that are using their homes for Airbnb for short-term rentals. that tax would be automatically added to the Airbnb rental bill, and it would be collected by Airbnb and paid to the city of Massillon. The fact that we don't have that right now kind of surprises me because most municipalities do that already. So that's another revenue that we're probably missing out on and should be collecting. I think that if we do this, the money should be used to justify a position to be added to the compliance department to track down these landlords that are not registered with the city and see to it that they become registered. And then that position can also track the registrations to make sure everybody stays up to date as they should in the future. Mr. Hernkane and I have been discussing throughout this whole year through council meetings the possibility of adding a part-time animal compliance coordinator to the compliance office. I'm not so sure that the position that we would create to make a position to track down these landlords and then to follow up on everybody going forward would be a full-time position, but this position could be split between animal compliance coordinator and the registration position. I believe also that if we're going to be pulling in this kind of revenue, that the compliance office should be presenting regular reports to this council and allowing them to and letting us know just exactly what is happening in the compliance office as far as what complaints that we have, how they're driven, and what the resolutions are. If there's any outstanding complaints that are yet to be resolved. We also, we can impose fees for those who are out of compliance. I believe our inspection fees are more than fair, but I think that if we're looking at somebody, when I look at the inspection fee schedule, the initial inspections, no charge, and the first re-inspection to make sure all violations are corrected is also no charge. And I have no problem with that. Things happen, things break, you've got to give somebody a chance to get it fixed. However, if there's another re-inspection for a violation not corrected, I think $50 isn't, I think that's pretty low, because at that point, if the landlord hasn't corrected it after we've pointed it out to them and re-inspected it, then I think at that point those fees should increase and increase incrementally. But I think starting at 50 is just too low. If you own a property and you're renting it out to tenants and it's not in compliance, we give you the opportunity to get it in compliance, and you don't do that, then I believe that you need to start being fined, and fined a lot heavier than $50 increments for not taking care of your property that you're expecting somebody else to pay you rent on and to occupy. At this point, those are my thoughts, Mr. Slutz.
Thank you. Mr. Hernkane, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Slutz. Over the last 24 to 48 hours, I have received more phone calls on this matter than I have the last 14 months that I've been on council, which I think really says something about this issue. I'm very concerned with the number of properties that are not registered, the 1,200 to 1,800, wherever that figure may be. I guess I have a question that if a landlord has not even paid the $50 initial fee to register their property, why would they register at a higher fee annually? I think that number of unregistered properties really needs to be looked at in terms of getting those folks compliant to making this more universal and quote unquote fair. The nature of the rental business is that the landlords are going to pass on to the tenant any increase in costs. That is pretty much how it works. So anytime there's additional fees or anything put on a landlord, they're going to increase the rent on their tenant. I think we have to be mindful of the fact and very cognizant of the fact that in the COVID era, in the times that we're in, that there are people that are struggling out there in Massillon, Ohio, and a rental increase is probably the last thing they need. They could be having work issues. They could be having childcare issues. I think that knowing how the business works, that is what's going to happen. I think we need to keep those tenants, the 5,500 or so that I heard last meeting that were rental properties in the city. I think we need to keep those folks in mind as to what's in their interest. When we talk about a fee of whatever dollar amount on an annual basis, I think we should consider looking at, how can we incentivize good rental practices with, starting with the landlords that have their properties registered. I think we can maybe look at a scale where Councilman Lombardi did a very good job kind of laying out how, the fees could increase due to non-compliance. But what if we incentivize good rental practices through maybe a reduced registration fee for those landlords who haven't had any code violations or any type of complaints and keep their places up? I think, if you're going to do something annually, I think we may want to reward or at least recognize the landlords that are the majority of the landlords in town that are doing the right thing. And maybe they get a break looking at the prior year if they've had no violations, and if they've had, long tenures of occupancy. Maybe we look at a kind of a reduced rate in terms of a fee for them based on their performance. That could also incentivize those to, do the right thing further by maybe paying less should they do the right thing. Those are some of my thoughts, Mr. Slutz. I think Mark did a very good summation of this. I do like the animal code compliance component of that department. He's correct. We've been talking about this for a year as well. But those are my thoughts on this, and I've talked to more people in the last day or two on this matter than I have on any other issue, and all have been in opposition to an annual registration fee. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other council members. Okay, Mr. Lewis.
Most of my sentiments would be mirrored by the other two. I, like Mr. Hernkane, have heard, constant phone calls on this issue. None of them in favor of it, of course. I just want to point out that comments have said that this is a tax on the landlords. And there's truth behind that, but I would take it one step further. As Mr. Hernkane stated, it really becomes a tax on the middle class and lower income people, because this will be passed on, as already stated. I don't understand how this directly addresses non-registration or trouble properties. So I would like to hear an answer as to how this would handle that. And why are such things like sewer bills and property tax not being utilized to find these owners that aren't registering? They send sewer bills out to everybody. So, someone's paying that sewer bill. And if it's the renter, that's fine. Why don't we just ask the renter who their landlord is? They know because they're paying someone. And really, we've had a fee in place for about 6 years. And I was resistant 6 years ago when this first fee came up. And I can tell you 6 years ago, the same arguments we're hearing now were made then. We got to somehow capture all these properties. We got to document these properties. We got to find the bad landlords. Well, what have we done over the last 6 years with our current system to achieve that? And why is an increased fee the answer if it wasn't the answer a few years ago? Because we tried it and it still seems to be an issue. So I am concerned about that. And then the one caveat of this that we haven't talked about, because we have looked, it's become a big piece of renters and landlords, but the ordinance request is actually saying non-owner occupied. So that's a broad term. What if I purchased a second home and I had my mother living in that home? She's not the owner, I am. Now I'm having to register my mother is proper, the property that a family member's in or something that I'm not receiving income on. So now you're taking non-income producing property and making them pay fees as well. So there's a lot of questions that I need answers to as we move forward. And that's all I wanted to add to that, Mr. Slutz.
Thank you. Councilwoman Starrett.
Thank you, Mr. Slutz. Like I said at the last, is, I think, for most council members, a little too high. I don't see why we're going from the $50 fee and jumping all the way to $80 annually. It seems like a large increase going from a one-time fee to now an exponentially larger fee annually. I think if we're going to do an annual registration, I'm in favor with that because, landlords can change hands. I don't see an issue with an annual registration. But like I said before, there should be an initial fee and then some type of reduced fee afterwards, as long as you're registering your property yearly. So it's not a money grab at that point. I also had a landlord contact me about some type of more like doing them in a block rate, like 1 to 4 is this fee, 4 to 10 this fee, 10 to 15 rentals this fee. So we're not really gouging those that have a lot of rental properties, which I think that might be a good idea as well. I think we really need to look at the scale of this and how we can reward landlords in the long run. I think this legislation needs a lot of work before we move forward on it. I like the idea of making sure that we keep landlords in some type of registration and know who's renting out to who in case we do run into those landlords that we have problems with, but I don't want to penalize those landlords that we don't have issues with as well.
Thank you. Councilman Tharrett.
Thank you, Councilman Slutz. Just a couple of points real quick. You can't look at this as a money grab, okay? It's not a money grab. This is a standard cost of doing business issue. We're trying to take some of the burden that we placed on our all the taxpayers by collecting a fee for service. And that's what this is. This is a fee for service. We as a city are providing a service of inspection of properties. That's what we do. The building department has to be certified. They have to carry certifications. They have to provide bond, and they have to be there physically to inspect properties. This has to, and again, I'm not saying that it's the $80 proposal is right in any way, shape, or form. I do believe there needs to be some ongoing fees, and I'm definitely all for rewarding the landlords and the property owners that remain in compliance. That's the biggest issue there is we need to protect the citizens of the city. That's our job as the safety and code enforcement officers, is to protect the citizens of the city. And we're not trying to penalize anybody in particular. The burden is just passed on to the people that are receiving the services. So when we do these inspections, and if it's $50 for the initially and everything goes fine, you want to waive it, you want to reduce it to $5 or $10 the following year, whatever. But we are maintaining contact, which is important. So we have a working structure of who owns what in case of emergencies, in case of other contact issues. We need to have that ongoing list. And the simple record keeping isn't cheap either. But again, once we have everyone established, and it's between the building department and code enforcement department. And again, I'm not here to set their rules, but you got a snow day, sounds like a computer day. There's usually plenty of opportunity in between inspections and other jobs to do some research, and then maybe set your schedule for the next week of going out and visiting properties. I did this before. It's not a complicated affair, but it is in the best interest of the citizens of the city. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you. Councilwoman Littman.
Thank you, Mr. Slutz. I too am extremely concerned about the number of non-registered properties, rental properties in the city. However, I think the goal of this legislation should be to get the annual registration of all rental properties, not so much the dollar figure that is collected. So I would propose that we actually lower our annual registration fee to maybe $25. But again, require that all rental properties to be registered annually. Therefore, it's not putting a huge burden on anyone, whether the landowner or the property owner wishes to pass that along to the renter or absorb it themselves. It is a very small fee, but again, it would be annual so that, as Ms. Sterrett stated, that annual knowledge is known of the properties. A lot of things can happen in a year's time, whether the property is sold, transferred, has had water damage, whatever the case might be. I think that annual registration is extremely important, not the dollar figure collected. I'll also state on the collection of the inspection fees, I do think that the initial inspection at no charge and the first re-inspection at no charge is certainly appropriate. But I also think that if there are violations that are not being repaired or corrected in the information that they should be compliant, that the $50 fee, the $100 fee, and even the $150 fee for non-compliance would be acceptable. And I just go back to, I recommend a $25 fee versus the 50 we currently have, or even the proposed 80, but making it a requirement to have that annual registration. Thank you.
Thank you. Last comments will be by Councilman Gregg. I'm sorry, but it is 6:27.
Thank you, Mr. Slutz. I'll be brief. I agree with a lot of the sentiments, especially from Councilman Lewis and Councilwoman Sterrett. I'm not crazy about an annual fee because I think we are penalizing the compliant landlords, and I really think we should focus on the non-compliant. So my thought would be we have a fee. I don't care what the dollar amount is, 50 or 80, whatever that may be, one time up front. But when we have to go out and we find a non-compliant landlord that has not registered, that fee should be much higher for their first registration. So whether you call it a fee or a fine, I don't care. But I think that's what we would do to try and induce a better compliance. The other thought on that is my other thought is that you could have a graduating fee so that the more units the landlord has, as Mrs. Sterrett had mentioned, maybe the fee goes lower. Although the more units they have a higher cash flow as well. So I'm okay with that. But again, my point is I'm not in agreement with an annual fee for everybody that's the same, because that's penalizing the good landlords. And one other thing I just want to mention that Councilman Lombardi touched on earlier, the VRBO question. That's a totally separate issue and question, and definitely one we need to address at some point going forward. But it's not part of this, I don't think. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Slutz.
Councilwoman Creamer, I think we have time for one more.
Thank you, Mr. Sleuth. I'll make it quick. Just a few comments. Based on our initial conversation, our registered properties are at 66%. So we have 34% unregistered properties. I think based on, Jimmy Johnson, code enforcement officer, he stated that they follow up and they try to track these non-registered land property owners when they have time. I would like, before we implement something and start throwing fees at people. I want a priority of getting those non-registered properties registered. I think once we get at least 95% of the city, those property registered, I think then we can look at possibly if we want an annual fee, but I'm not in favor of that $80. I would like something lower and more of a sliding scale based on the number of units. But I really think a priority with code enforcement is going out and identifying these properties. And I like the idea of an additional possibly position with animal control and this position, so we can like move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I don't feel like we should be bringing this forward to a vote, and I feel like maybe we should meet about this again in 2 weeks. Diane, would it be okay to meet at 5:30 instead of 6?
Yes, sir, if that's okay with the rest of the committee. Will they be available?
Anybody object to that?
Mr. Slutz.
I'm sorry?
I'm in favor of that.
Thank you.
I'm fine with that as well.
Thank you. Okay, Diane, can we set that in 2 weeks at 5:30?
Okay. First. So that would be March the 8th, I believe, at 5:30 for the next Health and Welfare Committee meeting.
Yes, thank you. With that, this will conclude this meeting.
We don't get to speak? We don't get to speak?
You don't get to speak for the first half of this meeting.
I can explain it in a second, ma'am.
Thank you.
Diane, as we are moving to our regularly scheduled 6:30 meeting, I would just say that we already have a roll of council members. Are there any city officials who have come on since we've started the meeting of 6 o'clock?
Jason Popeil is here, engineer.
Richard, Law Director.
Terry Argent, Health Department.
Samantha Walters, Community Development Director.
Okay, Ed, we need to take a brief pause so that Mark can stop the recording for the Health and Welfare Committee meeting and begin the meeting for our regular work session.
Yes.
So the public has no say-so?
Ma'am, I'm going to explain that in just a moment, please.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that, Ed.
Mr. Lewis, you should be good to go now.
All right. Miss Rowland, did you get the 3 names, Popeil, Richards, and Samantha Walters?
Popeil, Richards, and Walters.
Are there any other members of administration that are Terry Argent, I believe.
Yes. And I just wanted to throw out there, Ed, the reason that Bill Bartos is not on the meeting tonight is because they are delivering their first baby boy. So he will not be in attendance tonight.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I know I fall through the cracks, but I've been here.
Mayor?
No,
That's it.
It's Claudette Eisnick.
Oh, okay, okay. What about Mayor Kathy Catazero Perry?
Good evening.
Yeah.
And Barb Sylvester, Safety Service Director. Chief Deputy Auditor Debbie Bonk or Chief Deputy Auditor Stephanie Myers. I know David Maley is here. Park and Rec Director Steve Pedro. Is there anyone else from administration that I might have missed? Okay, Ed, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ms. Rowland. Okay, so real quickly here, I do want to explain a little bit of what is going on. I know that we have a lot of people that are very interested in the topic that we just had a 30 minutes discussion. Whenever there is a request for legislation brought to council, it is first sent to committee, and that is what we just observed was the Health, Welfare, and Building Committee discussing it for the second time. They, as a committee, have to agree to place it on the agenda. So you might hear that language spoken at some point. Once they agree to place it on the agenda, it'll go to our official meeting in which we vote. So next week would be one of those regular scheduled meetings that we do vote on ordinances and make things into law. This time, that committee has not placed it on the agenda, so it is not in front of council to be voted on. So the registration for non-owner occupied properties has not even reached the threshold of being able to be voted on at this time. In case this committee will be discussing it again, and they may at that time decide to put it on the agenda. As far as public speaks, we do allow a time for public speaks at the end of this meeting, which is our regular work session. We will go through all committees that we have, all 9 of our committees, and they will all discuss any business that they have before them. And then at the end, we will allow opportunity for public speaks. You will also have an opportunity to have public speaks at our regular session at the beginning or the end of the meeting. So to answer the question, yes, there will be plenty of opportunities for the public to speak, but I just wanted to make sure everybody also knew that at this time, this piece that we're talking about hasn't even gotten to the point where council could cast a vote. So with that said, Jamie, I'm going to go out of order. Is there anything in your committee that you need to finish up?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
So when we come to your committee, I'll just skip it since you already had everything tonight.
Okay, thank you.
All right, community development.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I have 3 new pieces tonight. Each piece is economic development inducement grants. The first one is for Print Bar that is located at 45 First Street Northwest in Massillon. They're requesting $7,500 for startup costs, including build out equipment, etc. I'm just going to kind of talk about all 3 of these together and then we'll go from there. The second piece is for an economic development inducement grant for Head to Toe Salon and Spa at 224 First Street Northeast in Massillon. And they're requesting $7,500 for a startup costs, including build out and equipment, etc. And the final economic development inducement grant that we have is for Kathy Boyd's hair studio at 212 Federal Avenue, and they're looking at $3,000 grant for expansion costs. This is an already existing business. We also should have been sent the score sheet that we have for each of these businesses. Did everybody get that? Mr. Maley did send that out, which is the score sheet we used for Mr. Maley to determine the amount of grant that he wanted to possibly award. Mr. Maley, do you have anything further at this point that you would like to add for these?
Ms. Sterrett, no, you pretty much covered a lot of it. Obviously 2 of them are for new businesses, one's for an existing business. And basically what the amounts are is sort of what we're recommending based on what the criteria is. Obviously they probably most of them ask for more than that, but that's what we give based on our criteria. All the applicants should be on the call. So I don't know how if you want to have the opportunity for them to speak and talk about what they're doing.
Yes, I would, if we could do that. Do we have anybody here tonight from Print Bar?
Yes, hi, this is Eugene Rhee. I'm the president and co-founder of the Print Bar.
Sir, if you could just go ahead and kind of tell us what your business plan is and what you plan on doing.
Sure. I was born and raised here in Massillon. My family's been in business here downtown for over 37 years. More recently, we are opening up a silk screen printing business. As many of you may already know, screen printing is just a method of creating all sorts of fabrics and textiles and products using an ink with a screen, like a mesh stencil, and it goes through and it allows it to go onto the fabric. This kind of printing is most commonly used on garments like t-shirts and hoodies and hats. And we'll be able to print for sports teams, leagues, local businesses, schools. But our main focus is commercial printing, and that'll be for brands and companies that are in need of larger quantities. We currently have 2 printing presses right now. One's a manual press and the other is an automatic press. The manual press is more a traditional type, and we operate that by hand, and it's for smaller applications ranging from about 1 to 50 t-shirts. The automatic press is capable of printing about 1,000 to 1,200 t-shirts an hour. And it's also capable of printing up to 8 colors. Just to give you an idea or a reference, most t-shirts that you see have about 1 to 2 colors. If you see something with about 3 to 5 colors, that's actually considered a lot in our industry. Another thing that the automatic press provides is that it's a lot more of a better quality. It has accuracy. It's shorter production and turnaround times, which is going to allow us to focus on coming up with new designs and bringing in more business. Recent studies that I've seen show that the textile printing machine markets will be reaching about $13,988 million by 2025. So having this automatic unit that can print 1,200 t-shirts an hour can open up a lot of opportunities for us in our industry, and I believe opportunities for our city to grow. Like, we really want to be able to bring in more jobs and give back to the community here in Massillon. I think that would be great. I just want to thank you guys for your time and opportunity, for giving me this platform to share my ideas with you guys and talk about the business. I look forward to making an impact here downtown Massillon. If you have any other questions or if you would like to talk about it or anything, feel free to ask.
Council members, do you have any questions at this time? Committee members? Mr. Lewis and then Ms. Lippman.
I have general questions about all 3 grants. So if you want us to wait on the general so that we can go through each 3, that's fine.
Yeah, let's go. Any questions specifically for the print bar? Let's go that route first. Ms. Lippman.
Thank you, Mrs. Sterrett. I would ask how many employees they will be starting the business with. I know on our inducement grant guidelines, it does say 0 to 5. So I'm asking specifically how many employees he will have. And second, what is the amount that they have contributed to this business thus far?
Okay, so we will have 3 full-time jobs as of now. We would like to get a couple of more as we grow. As of now, we have put in on just equipment costs is about $87,000. The renovations and accommodating those, the equipment is about $21,000. And for other little things here and there, we've put in about $17,000 as well. The press that we have is an instrument of precision. And so that requires a team from Illinois to come down and install and calibrate, and so that everything's working properly the first time. And then after that, it doesn't need the calibration like that. It'll be calibrated by ourselves. Does that answer your question, or?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ferret.
Thank you, Mr. Sterrett. I didn't catch the address.
It is 45 First Street Northwest, Massillon, Ohio, downtown. It's right next to First Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferret, that used to be the old TIG grill.
Any other questions at this time for Print Bar?
Just wanted to state, Councilwoman Sterrett, that's right next to Champion Cleaners.
Thank you, Diane. All right. Thank you, sir, for your comments at this point, and thank you for joining us tonight. Do we have anybody here from Head to Toe Salon and Spa as well that would like to address City Council?
Yes, I'm Tracy Freeman. I'm the owner of Head to Toe Salon and Spa.
Okay. Would you like to tell us about your business plan and what you're planning on doing with the grant money?
Okay, well, I've lived in Massillon all my life, and I've been self-employed for 26 years in the hair business. My plan is having a full-service salon here in Massillon. I've purchased a beautiful historical building on First Street. So I plan on having a full service and having 7 employees, you know, to bring more jobs. And so that's what I plan on doing. I've rented, you know, stations and have been self-employed, so I just wanted to have my own business. Has always been a dream of mine. I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
No, that's okay. Quick question. In the salon, will you be renting out space to independent contractors, or how will this be set up?
Yes, I will be. I have 6 stations available to be rented, and I also have 3 to 4 rooms upstairs also to be rented out for massage and esthetician and spray tanning and full lash extension. So I have 4 rooms available upstairs as well.
And how much funds have you put into the renovations at this point?
Well, we're planning on putting in $10,000 in renovation. Actually $15,000 in renovation upstairs, and also $15,000 in equipment.
And Ms. Sterrett, she she bought the building. She's not leasing the building, so she actually bought the building. Investment.
Questions from council members? See Ms. Lippman.
Yes, I have a question of Ms. Freeman. What kind of a timeline do you have for the opening of this business? And will it all be opening? I'm sorry, go ahead.
As of right now, we're looking at 2 to 3 months until we open.
And will all services be opening at the same time, or will you be phasing in your business plan?
I'm going to be phasing in.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferret.
Could we ask what the actual address is on First Street?
It is 224 First Street Northeast.
Mr. Ferret, it's a white brick building. I believe it used to be a dentist office at one point, right across from First North building.
Yes. Yeah.
And another thing to make clear, and me and Tracy have talked quite a bit. One thing is we do not give out the grant, actually give any money out until the business actually opens. So I know this may be a little bit premature, but she had come to us a while back, and so she would not get any money until she actually opened.
Any other questions from council members for Ms. Freeman? Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mrs. Sterrett. I just am curious for this business owner, and I should have asked this for the previous as well. How do you plan to market your services to make yourself known in Massillon and the surrounding area?
Actually, I'm going to be doing a lot of footwork. I'm going to be going to businesses around here. Like I said, I've also been in the business for 26 years, so I do have a good stealthy amount of clients, 200 plus, that are also do my advertising for me, actually. And so I'll be having them as well. And I'm going to be doing a lot of footwork going up and down to these businesses and taking pamphlets and business cards and letting them know that I'm here in Massillon here.
Okay.
And then I'm going
Thank
to
you,
be
Mrs. Sarah.
doing also Facebook and social media.
Thank you.
Councilman, this is Eugene Ree with the print bar.
Yes.
Just to answer your question as well, we will have a large online presence. We'll be on Instagram, Facebook. We'll have an online store. We also have 2 large clients already for our business that is more commercial, on the commercial side for brand and large quantity tees and athletic wear.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Freeman on Head to Toe Salon and Spa? Okay. And finally, on our last piece, is there anybody here from Kathy Boyd's Hair Studio that would like to address City Council?
Hello, I'm Kathy.
Kathy, if you could just go ahead and tell us what your plan is with the inducement grant.
Well, actually, I just want to thank you guys for this opportunity today. I've been a licensed cosmetologist for 33 years, and I've been in Massillon the whole time. My first 10 years, I started out at a chain salon, and I was there for 10 years, and then I wanted to be out on my own, so I rented a small, it's like a little one-man shop. I was there 11 years, and then I thought I wanted to grow my business, so I moved to my current location, which is 212 Federal Avenue Northwest. I'm in the plaza there, and I've been there for 12 years. Pretty much for the first 3 years, it was just myself and my daughter, and I might have had like a barber come and go here and there, but nobody ever really stayed that long. So it's just pretty much been her and I. And then in 2020, I decided to invest back into my business, and I put in $25,000. We did a whole remodel. We did the ceiling, the floors. I bought new equipment and, did all the lighting and everything. It just looks beautiful. Then with that being said, I really didn't have any extra money for a sign out, for outside on my roof. So with this grant money, I got a couple estimates and stuff. That's what I would plan on doing with that. As far as like word of mouth, I mean, I've been in this industry for 33 years, and, a lot of people know me, and my business is already established. It's just for the new people that I have starting. I want to be able to have a sign out there so that, people will know where the shop is. With the remodel, I'm currently full staffed. I have 4 full-time cosmetologists already. I have 1 part-time cosmetologist. I have a nail tech and 1 barber that's coming in March. So I have 7 people working, including myself. And I don't feel like without this remodel, I don't think that would be my current situation right now. But I just want to thank you guys for this opportunity, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Any questions for her on her business? All to business owners for coming and addressing City Council tonight. Mr. Lewis, I know you said you had some general questions about the grants, and we can open up to council for just general conversation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. My question first, Mr. Maley. I believe with these grants, they're given on the premise that the business will stay open and operating for, is it 5 years, Mr. Maley?
Yes, it is, Mr. Lewis.
And all these businesses have been made aware of that.
Yes, they have.
So if they are not open 5 years from now, the business does owe the city the grant money or grant dollars back, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's my segue to my next question of, I know we've given out numerous grants in the past few years, and this is nothing about these 3. This is a general question about our grant process. So I don't want this to sound like any kind of indication on the 3 currently in front of us. But have we collected any of that?
As far as ones that have gone, that have not followed through the 5 years?
Correct.
We have collected on 1 of them. Actually, I have a printout in front of me, Mr. Lewis, that goes back to 2013. Unfortunately, I didn't count the number of actual grants that we've given out, but we've had 1, 2, 3. We've only had 3 that, or four, I'm sorry, four that have not worked out and not fulfilled on their commitment. We did get money back from one, and I can tell you, the other one was a little bit different issue because the business wasn't the same. It transferred, the business remained open. So we thought that wasn't, that basically was still okay as far as it didn't go anywhere. It still have employees there, but just a different owner. There are two though that we currently, in the law department has them still going after them.
Thank you. And then coupled with this, and tonight during the finance committee section, there's appropriations associated with these. Can you speak to a little bit about that? Like, do we have budget dollars for these grants this year, or how did that process work out?
Yeah, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis, the amount, what I was coming forward with basically the 18,000 for the ones that we're discussing tonight. And the auditor's office, Debbie and Stephanie, had asked whether we could just do more of a lump sum. That way we don't have to go forward every time to get every time we have a grant. I guess the process is a little cumbersome for them to do it that way. So basically, I can tell you that last year was a slow year, obviously with COVID. We did 3 grants for 25,000. The prior year, we did anyway. But this number, I just counted them up. Since 2013, we've done 35 grants, and we've only had 4 of them at this point not follow through on their commitment. But in 2019, we spent about close to $59,000 on grants. And in 2018, we spent 50,000. So, you know, I was basically ballparking it. We didn't put anything in the budget for economic development grants because we thought we'd just come to council and use some carryover funds. But we just kind of agreed on 60,000 as a number if that's what we're discussing the finance piece, Mr. Lewis.
All right, I'll probably have more questions for that during finance.
That's fine.
Any other questions from council members on these inducement grants tonight? I do see that they are marked with emergency language, but Diane, I don't think we have any necessity for emergency language on these, especially because one of the businesses isn't even up and running yet, and the funds won't be distributed until that business is up and running if we do vote this. So I will give my verbal tonight, but I would ask that we remove emergency language. Oh, Mr. Maley, I saw you.
Yeah, could we, and I totally agree, Ms. Sterrett, especially I think that the the salon probably does need it, but I think Kathy Boyd, if we could keep the emergency on that, I think she's up and running. She's already invested. I think she wants to get a sign. If we'd be willing to keep just it on that one, I think that would be appropriate, possibly, Ms. Sterrett.
I just worry about the appropriateness of having emergency language when it's not actually a necessity at this point. So I know you want it because we can move it forward, but I'm not seeing much of a necessity unless somebody can see it anyways for the health and welfare of the city.
Well, no, that's fine. That's fine.
So I will give my verbal to place these on the agenda tonight. If there's no other discussion.
I'll give my verbal.
And so we are placing these 3 on the agenda Monday without emergency language on all 3?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you.
That is all I have.
All right, environmental.
Nothing from environmental.
Parks and Rec.
Nothing for Parks and Rec.
Police and Fire.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I do have one request for legislation from Chief Bergasser, our fire chief. It indicates that this legislation request is to accept a donation from Grief Brothers in the amount of $3,000. they would like to ask that this donation be placed to supplies and materials for supplies and equipment purchases. Is Chief Burgasser on the line this evening? Mayor, are you able to answer any questions regarding this donation?
Yes, they usually make a donation every year, every couple years, and it's most always to the fire department. So we appreciate that. We thank them for that. And that's pretty much it.
Well, I do see that there's a copy of the check attached with a notation on the request for legislation that the check has already been received and deposited. Are there any questions or concerns from the Police and Fire Committee regarding this donation? Mr. Lombardi, Mr. Barrett?
No, as the mayor stated, that's been kind of an ongoing thing with Wright Brothers. They've been very supportive of the fire department.
Agreed. I do recall in years past that this type of donation has occurred from Grief Brothers as well. Are there any questions from any other council members? Then I wouldn't have any problem with putting this on the agenda for next week's meeting. So you do have my verbal approval. The other committee members?
I'll give my verbal, Lombardi.
They're at my verbal also.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do see that it is marked for emergency language as well. Because this is already deposited, the check is already in hand, I don't see any reason why we should not continue with the emergency language. So I would be okay with that for our legislation for next week.
Thank you.
Lewis, that's all I have this evening.
Public utilities?
Nothing from Public Utilities, Councilman Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you. Rules and courts?
Nothing from rules and courts this evening.
Streets and highways?
Yes, Mr. Lewis, we have a couple pieces tonight. The first one is states that please prepare legislation to authorize the Director of Public Safety and Service to enter into a project and maintenance agreement for the 12th Street Hankins Road Northeast with the Stark County Commissioners. You should have all the attachments there. The city and the county, upon authorization, the council will jointly improving the roadway from Valerie Northeast to just west of Jackson Avenue. Estimated cost is $89,210. With the city and the county, they're going to split the cost based on this estimate. They do have emergency language. They do wish to advertise for bids in April for summer construction. That's why it has emergency language. Any questions from the committee? Screamer?
Thank you, Mr. Third. I just need clarification from the engineer department. The agreement says 12th Street and Hankins, and that's throughout the entire agreement until you get to general maintenance. That's when they're specifically laying out partial areas of Hankins. So I was just clarifying that this is only going to take place certain areas of Hankins. And can he verify that?
You know, like the maintenance isn't going to change. It's still this. We're going to take care of the same part of Hankins that we always have. We're just finally writing it down. Your question was, is the maintenance and the repaving the same area?
Yes, because it's specifically under general maintenance, it's specifically laying out a certain area versus the agreement has just stated 12th Street and Hankins. So when I read through it, I was led to believe it was the entire Hankins and 12th Street, and I just need clarification.
I'll have to go check it. I think, okay, it's the repaving of Hankins and the county will maintain it up to Jackson, and then the cities from Louis Marie to Valerie. And that entire area is what we're repaving from Valerie. I gotta open this up here, so I'm having it open on two windows here. So yeah, we're repaving from just from Valerie to,
Did you speak yet?
I'm sorry, if you can't hear me. We're repaving it from Valerie to Jackson Avenue. It's 50-50 split because it's half in the county, half in the city, and the maintenance is not changing. The maintenance will be, so they're saying from, is that Louisa Marie or Lisa Marie to Jackson will be the county, and will be from Valerie to Louise Marie. So, yeah, nothing, it's the exact same area. We're repaving from Valerie to Jackson, and we're doing the maintenance all the way up to Louise Marie, and the county's doing the maintenance from there on to Jackson. So yes, they're both the same area. I know it's kind of confusing, but and
Right.
again, the maintenance isn't changing. It's always been this way. They're just reiterating it again with the contract.
And that was kind of my question, because the maintenance is specifically names certain areas versus the agreement did not. So I just wanted to be clear on what exactly was taking place. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I'm reading the contract itself. It indicates that the county will be paying for the renovation in its entirety, and then the city will be reimbursing the county for half of the expenditure. Can I ask if this is to be completed in 2021?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yes, yeah, we want to, the county's going to take care of the bidding, and they want to do that as soon as possible, as soon as April, and it will be done this summer, yes.
So the cost of this is going to be coming from the city's half, is going to be coming out of our road tax. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. Is it coming out of what?
The road tax versus unappropriated.
It's actually, there's legislation to follow regarding the funding. It's going to be coming out 1206. Muni Motor Vehicle Fund.
Okay, I'll reserve my questions for that point. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Is that about the salt? Has that come up?
Any other comments or questions from council? Seeing none, like to get this placed on the agenda for next week. And it does include emergency language so that we can get the bidding process started as quick as possible. So I give my verbal.
I give my verbal. Creamer.
Slutes gives his verbal.
Thank you.
Thank you all. The next one is another one, prepare legislation to accept the replat and dedication of road right away on Woodruff Avenue Northwest, as you'll see on your attached map. And it's February 10th, 2021 meeting, the City Planning Commission approved this replat, including the dedication of additional right of way of 40 feet. The total dedication area is 0.056 acres, so it's not that much. The area is currently zoned R1 single family residential, and there's no emergency language attached to this. Maybe the engineer, if you have any other comments about this.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. It started out as a just changing the gentleman owns two houses next to each other, and he was just adjusting the property line to allow more room from one lot to the other. And during the survey, they discovered that the road was never dedicated, at least in this one section, to in front of the parcel. The rest of the road is, so they're just dedicating the right of way to the city while they are adjusting their property lines.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, then Diane, I give my verbal to put this on the agenda next week.
I give my verbal. Creamer.
Sleuth gives a verbal.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next piece is please prepare legislation to authorize the Director of Public Safety and Service to sign the preliminary legislation with ODOT for the pavement markings along US 30, the Western Corporation limit to State Route 627 within the city limits. Whereas the state has identified the need to perform these upgrades located within the corporation limits of the City of Massillon, per the section 5521.01 of the Ohio Revised Code, Director of Transportation is required to request and receive legislation from municipalities prior to making any necessary repairs on state highways within the corporation limits. This project is currently scheduled for May of 2022, so they are requesting emergency language. I believe this is one of those standard requests for permission to operate in the city, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Cookie.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Mr. Theriot. This is I know they're going to be repaving 30, and this is the follow up when they do the marking, the pavement marking. No cost to the city. It's just a requirement for ODOT.
Thank you for that clarification. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, then Diane, I give my verbal to put this on the agenda for next week.
I give my verbal. Creamer.
Verbal from Sleuth.
Thank you.
I have no other pieces pending, but I do have a question for an observation. This last big snowstorm, as you know, precipitated a lot of problems around the city, and ask a few questions on the administration and the street department have done a bang up job on keeping our streets as clean as they could. One issue that I was talking with Director McBride today, and they could use a better storage facility down there. Right now, we're very limited in storage of salt. Years ago, I understand there was a proposal to build a 5,000 ton storage hut or whatever it is, a shelter there on the premises, but it was never funded. I'd like to see if we can't get at least some discussion and get some movement on that in the not too distant future, so that actually saves the city, keeps us in a little safer attitude. Mr. Hurricane, you had a question?
Well, thank you, Mr. Theriot. I was actually going to ask something along the same lines. What is the city's storage capacity? How many tons can we support at one time?
1,500 tons.
Okay. I know that Perry Township is about 6,000 tons and Jackson Township is about 7,500 tons. I'd have to assume that our miles of roadway that we would salt would fall in between those two communities. So what I wanted to ask was, one, what is our storage capacity? And thank you for sharing that. But the other part would be, does that hamper our ability to be effective, especially when we have the weather we have? I would say 1,500 tons is probably not a lot, and we have to be ordering it a great deal. I appreciate you bringing that up, because I was going to ask the same thing. I think that is something we should look at maybe for next winter.
Right.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
I mean, obviously, this is a hot topic because, I was looking into this a little bit this morning, because my concern was, I know that back, I believe it was 2014, 2015, somewhere in there, council did pass, I believe, about a $350,000 appropriation for a new structure, but it was never actually acted on, and those monies just went back into the accounts that they were appropriated from. So I would, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Thayer, maybe we could call upon the mayor and she could give us a little history of what happened at that time and refresh our memories.
Yeah, please.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. What I would tell you what we did back then is we enlarged the facility that we had already because our money was very, very tight. So Joel Smith was here at the time, and he took the lead on that and worked with Mr. McBride and enlarged what we already have. Do we need something better? The answer is yes, and we have been working on that, but have not been able to bring anything forward to you at this point. But it's a great cause, and it's another item that we need on our capital improvement list. I know that Safety and Service Director today, she and I uh, reviewed our list, and we'll be bringing to you over $1 million in the next several weeks. Uh, the the uh, the facility for the salt is not on that list, but we're taking baby steps as we bring things to you because there's a lot of things on the list we need to accomplish. So you'll be seeing that list coming up. One item is our records management system for the police department, and that's about 160,000. We also have another item is about 154,000, and that is a catch basin cleaner. So we'll be bringing that to you, as well as about $860,000 for a new truck for the fire department, a new ladder truck. So there you can see needs that we have in the community. Um, Everything needs to be done. It's just how far can we stretch the money?
Back to you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Oh, Mr. Hurricane?
Thank you, Mr. Thayer. I appreciate the mayor's comments on the capital request. I look forward to seeing that. I do know that the most recent one they built at Jackson, I think it cost less than $50,000. You know, I read there's an article that Steve Grazier at the Independent wrote back in 2014 in July on this matter, and I know we had a quote for I think it was 300 or 350,000 that would give us an additional 3,000 tons. But I think we could look at options that are maybe less expensive than that can serve you know, a capacity that can add to our total. So even if it's not with capital funds, I think that these structures aren't excessive, and I think we could certainly do one that would increase our capacity, maybe with some carryover funds that wouldn't be, you know, a couple $100,000. I think we could look at something 100 or less.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardi.
Thank you, Mr. Thayer. I'm just wondering if we build a larger facility, does this enable us to get our salt at even a cheaper price than what we do now because we'll be able to buy in heavier bulk?
Well, we're on a contract with the co-op. We've already met our quota for this year, according to Mr. McBride. Last year we were a little short, so we ended up having to store some to meet our quota. But I'm sure the mayor and the director could answer that much more specifically than I can. Mr. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Sterrett. I wanted to take maybe a different approach on this. I've talked to other members of council about this before very briefly, but I think the answer is more in the reduced use of salt on our streets. I would like to tailor our use a great deal and not blindly completely lay over salt all over our entire street that we just put millions of dollars into rebuilding and repaving. We know how corrosive salt is and the damage that it does to our streets, how poor it is for our water system, how much damage it does to our automobiles. I would like, and there are parts of the country that frankly get way more snow than we do that don't use salt at all. So I would like to look into other ways of perhaps attacking this problem and not building bigger storage areas and having to pay more for salt. Perhaps we can look at using a different method. I know some areas of the country use sand or grit, as they call it, which that gives you traction. I'm okay with using salt in targeted spots where it's icy and needs to be removed. The ice needs to be removed quickly, but just in blanketing our entire street system with salt, it seems crazy to me after the millions of dollars that we're spending to repave these streets. And the other advantage of sand or grit is that it can be, after it's used and the snow is melted, that can be swept up and reused again. That's something I would say we should consider, is looking into that type of approach as opposed to just buying more salt, spreading more salt, and causing more damage to our streets, our water system, and our cars. Thank you, Mr. Tharrett.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. I just had one concern with the sand, because that creates its own problems by clogging the sewer. So unless we're going to invest in that machine that the mayor was just talking about. So, everything comes with pros and cons, I'm guessing. Any other comments before we move on? Turn it back to Mr. Lewis.
All right, is that it for streets and highways?
Yes, sir.
All right, so Finance Committee, the last committee. The first piece we have is please prepare legislation to appropriate $50,000 for the unappropriated balance of the motor vehicle fund to an account titled Hankins Road Improvement. This is a 50-50 split. So this is what we were just discussing. The county wishes to advertise and receive bids in April for summer construction. Are there any additional questions? Ms. Littman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I guess I would just like to go back to my initial question earlier in the session. If this is coming out of the 1206, and it looks like it is entitled Hankins Road Improvement Project. So has that already been funded, or will that be funded with this, with unappropriated funds? So we're newly creating this line item. Is that correct?
They are asking us to take it out of the 1206 municipal fund, which is the larger fund, and place it specific. Yeah, so we're taking money that's in the 1206 fund and specifically earmarking it for this Hankins Road improvement.
Okay, so this is not coming out of dollars that have been set aside for our street tax.
I do not believe so. I'd have to double check with the auditor what that line is. Mr. Popeil, you don't have any insight to that, do you?
I think, no, I would defer to Barbara, the mayor, on the accounting of it.
I can tell you, no, that's not the street, the road account. That's a 1201 account. This is the 1206, which is a completely different fund. This is the Muni Motor Vehicle Fund.
Is this, I might be wrong, Ms. Sylvester, is this to do with like license and registrations of vehicles and things of that nature?
Yes, you are correct.
So when we get our license plates and all that stuff, we get a portion of that.
Okay, thank you.
I will provide my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you. And then we will keep this in line with the streets and highways. Obviously, Mr. Tharrett, whenever you move forward with your piece, we will then move forward with our piece. The next one is to please appropriate the $3,000 from Grief Brothers for the donation to the Massillon Fire Department as discussed. Any additional questions? Now, likewise, Ms. Littman, we will let this follow your piece when you move forward.
Thank you.
I will provide my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare an ordinance to appropriate $23,000 from the vacant foreclosure deposit fund 30104. This appropriation is needed to cover expenses for the housing market reinvestment program being completed for eligible residents of the city. The funds are to be appropriated as follows: $23,000 to the HMRP grant. Ms. Walters, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Would you like to speak to this at all?
Yes, we are appropriating the $23,000 that was brought in during calendar year 2020. As you know, $1,000 of each vacant foreclosure bond is put into this account to give back to the eligible homeowners that are purchasing homes in either the target area or purchasing a home that was previously foreclosed on. And last year we were able to give out actually 65 grants. It was our largest number of applicants so far, over $18,000. So that was great. We're looking forward to being able to give out a little bit more money this year and probably a similar amount of applications. So we have scheduled a newspaper ad to run on March 1st, and application period begins March 1st and ends March 31st.
That's great. It's good news. Love to see the program continuing to grow. Does anyone else have any questions regarding this? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
All right. The next one is please prepare legislation to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the South Massillon Trunk Fund 1423 to the following: $5,592.46 to supplies, material, and postage. This is to purchase manhole covers and castings for the South Massillon Trunk area. Does anyone have any questions regarding this? Creamer?
Can I just get clarification on what the South Massillon Trunk area is?
Is there someone from administration that can outline what that area is?
I can get that information for you if you wanted to be more specific.
Thank you. If we could have that by the next meeting, we'd appreciate that.
I can do that.
I do believe in speaking with the auditor earlier today. It doesn't answer your question, Ms. Creamer, but this is an account that's kind of just been in existence for a while. And as they are cleaning up some of our accounts, they asked the wastewater treatment plant, are there any projects or anything that you need that would be eligible for this funding? And they identified this potential need, and that's why it's in front of us tonight. But I don't know the geographic area.
It's just unfamiliar to me, so I just kind of wanted to educate myself.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare legislation to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the general fund, 1,100, $160,000 to accumulated sick leave. We have some retirees for 2021, and we do have to cover it. These were not known at the time of the budget process, so we were not able to budget for them. Are there any questions? Ms. Littman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. May I ask how many retirees were we surprised at for 2021 that we did not allocate this previously?
I'm only aware of 2 off the top of my head. Mayor, are you able to provide more insight?
We had a few of our, well, several of our directors are leaving this year.
Oh, yeah.
And a few of our officers, specifically one in the police department that we weren't sure of, that, you know, what happens is they decide that they're going to retire at some point. They go down to Columbus, they get all their information, and then they wait to tell us. And they, you know, so there's not all that we know about every year until they decide to share that information.
But to your point, a couple of these employees are director level and long-term employees, and that's part of the reason why it's driving this cost up so high.
That's correct.
And we're also beholden to pay this out per contracts and agreements with them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Any additional questions or discussion, Ms. Littman?
I'm sorry, our accumulated sick leave process, how much sick leave are they permitted to accumulate prior to either retirement or leaving, that we have this type of dollar amount that we need to allocate in a particular year?
This is Barb. I can answer that for you. There is particular criteria that has to do with that. And basically, the auditor's office does follow, and the standards that have been in place pretty much follows the OPERS guidelines. And when I say the criteria, there's different criteria for how many years someone has worked, and that determines how much of the sick hours they are able to accumulate and to be paid out.
Okay. We can get a more specific answer of that number, Ms. Littman.
I can pull out, we could get that out of our handbook so you have the exact numbers.
Yes, I just think if it's a criteria that we need to look at so that we don't have such an accumulation, or if it's by contract and the contract indicates this is how we have to handle it, that's one thing. But I know that the accumulation of sick time usually deters individuals from taking their sick time so that they are accumulating it for a cash payout in the future. So I guess I'm just making sure that, individuals or employees who are ill are taking their sick time so that they are not exposing others to, their ailments, awaiting a payout at some point in the future for a large dollar figure. So I'd just be looking at the process itself.
Absolutely. I can tell you, I mean, I don't know if this helps, but I know at my day employment, it's done by hours. So obviously you can only have so many hours of sick time accumulated, but if you're a director level with a decent earning, that can still be quite the hit. But yes, Ms. Sylvester, or we will have the auditor on at the next meeting so we can get a clear answer to that.
Yeah, I just would prefer to pull it right out of the handbook, the guidelines that we do go by and that the auditor's office goes by, rather than just off the top of my head.
Thank you. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Please prepare legislation to make a transfer in the 2021 appropriation of the 1228 Law Department Community Partnership Fund, transferring it out to the transfer in of $3,122. There's no reason here, but Mr. Richard, from my understanding, this is a fund that we are no longer participating in. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. The law department used to participate in a public complaint process, a citizens complaint process, and we received a federal grant. The federal grant, our office discontinued, or the federal grant was discontinued. We discontinued in that program approximately 2 years ago. So it's money that hasn't spent for at least 5 years, to my knowledge, and certainly should be returned back to the city.
Thank you. And so part of this, just kind of give everybody, it's in this fund at first, and the next piece is part of this. It has to $3,122.63, I believe, has to go to the transfer out, and then we transfer in. So we're gonna have to, you know, vote on both of these here soon, but that way we are able to get it to the general fund. Any questions or discussion? I give my verbal on both of them.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal on both as well.
And I will note there's no emergency language on either.
Thank you.
The next one is please prepare legislation to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the general fund to the following account. Transfer out $60,000. Appropriation is needed to cover estimated funding for economic inducement grants. The next one will take that same $60,000 and put it into the transfer in. And this is for the so that we would be able to fund the 3 that were discussed this evening, economic inducement grants. And then the third one, so we're transferring it out, transferring it in, and then appropriating it to service and contracts under economic development so that it can be paid out. So there's 3 pieces there in order to move this money. It's a little bit complicated.
Mr. Lewis, Dave Maley, I agree.
So it originates in the general fund, and we're just moving it over to the economic development. So I just wanted to know, why did we not budget for these grants for the 2021 year, Mr. Maley?
Well, I think at this point if you remember back when COVID hit, we froze grants altogether, just trying to figure out, you know, what was going on with our budget situation. And the thought was, I guess at some point was that, you know, we normally come to council anyway when we do these and ask for appropriations. So we were going to take it that route. When we had each one, we could individually do them. But like I said earlier, that I think the auditor's department feels it's a little cumbersome to do it that way. So they prefer that if we just take some lump sum out and try to cover the cost of the grants that were what we anticipate possibly this year. Could be more, could be less. Either way, the money would roll over into next year, that we could use it next year and then budget some money for next year for grants.
I'll tell you, I have no issue with the grants before us per se. What is it, about $18,000?
Yes.
And, you know, and I think the economic inducement grants have been beneficial to our community in general. My only concern here is that if we did not budget for it this year, then it makes it difficult to see how the budget will be there for 2022. Because if we didn't have the money for 2021, then why am I going to, you know, what makes us believe? I don't understand or maybe we budgeted for it before, and now we're not budgeting. Like, where did that money go, essentially? Why is there all of a sudden this closure and then a belief that it's going to open back up? Does that make sense?
Mr. Lewis, I think in the past, I'm trying to think if we budgeted money. There was money in the account for a number of years, and we've kind of like drained it over the years. Is the best way to describe it. We did budget, but there's always been money into the account, and we use that when we receive transfers with regards to when we sold land, etc. We used to put money in that account for that purpose. But you know, we haven't really sold any land or stuff over the last few years. Obviously, the hospital that situation was a little different because that went back into the hospital accounts. So we haven't replenished that fund. But like I said, our thought was to just, you know, go forward and hopefully just, you know, ask council each time we had a grant. But, you know, I think next year we probably should try to budget a certain number and hold to it if we can. And I don't think Ms. Boron would have an issue with that if she's on the call. But.
Well, and I'm going down this line of discussion because it makes me very nervous because we really don't know what 2021 looks like for us. Correct? We've been paying close attention to the COVID impact on our city financially. We saw a slight impact last year as we rolled into 2021. Many of us acknowledge that 2021 will still possibly see an impact as more of the tax collections occur through April 15th. So we don't really know how we're going to roll into 2022. Tonight, we've already seen a payout of $160,000 for sick time. We know we have approximately $1 million in capital projects that are going to be coming forward. We do have our road levy that's up, and we don't know if that'll be renewed. So we have a lot of variables right now that cause me to want to be a little bit cautious. And I know the auditor might not appreciate this because it could potentially create more work. But is anyone opposed to only doing a $30,000? That way you're able to cover the current proposals in front of you and have a little bit more to do, one or two more if need be.
Mr. Lewis, if you're asking if I'm opposed to it, I mean, I think, like I said initially, we talked about coming before council for individually. So, I mean, for me, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I don't want to speak for the auditor's office because they're the ones that kind of were emphasizing trying to move a little bit more money into that account so they wouldn't have to do this specifically. And if we do 30,000, Mr. Lewis, I mean, that gives us $12,000 and we may eat that up at the next grant. So we're only in February, so I anticipate we'll probably spend more than that.
Ms. Sterrett, you have a question?
I was just going to say, Mr. Lewis, I don't have an issue with that. I know that it seems like the auditor's office wanted to do this more out of, like we said, we're not creating more work in the long run. But I see your point that we have a lot of money going out, and we don't know how the future is going to look for the city at this point. So maybe if we do 30,000 now and we do the additional 30,000 later when we come up upon it, I don't see an issue with that. Because maybe we run into a situation where we can't give that extra $30,000 out.
Mr. Hernkane?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I don't see the problem in doing these piecemeal as we've always done because a grant agreement's going to have to come to council anyway to get approved. So why, to me, it's not much. If we have to do that individually, why we wouldn't do the finance piece individually as well when these come up. I mean, to have some money sitting in a fund somewhere for these grants, I mean, the agreement still has to come to council for approval. So I'm not sure I see the point.
Yeah. You mean see the point of making a large appropriation?
Correct. Because if there's 12 or 15 or $20,000 in there, I mean, if there's a grant that comes up, they still have to come to council to get that grant agreement approved.
Yeah. Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I think the point was a less cumbersome process for the auditor's department and perhaps some work saved there, but I'm also okay with a reduced amount initially. So if 30,000 is a better number, I'm good with that.
Ms. Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. My opinion would be rather than having a balance in a line item fund, that it should be upon request. And the reason I think that is because we tend to look at the balances of our line items and say, well, we've got $30,000 in there, we might as well spend it. And I guess I would think that we too need to be very careful with how we're spending dollars this year. So my opinion would be it should be sort of piecemealed as it always has been. When those requests come in and they are validated for by council and by the guidelines that Mr. Maley does, that a inducement grant would be warranted, then those dollars would be, if available, allocated from unappropriated funds.
Ms. Sterrett?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I do intend on only giving the inducement grant legislation first reading at the next meeting. Maybe it would behoove us not to move on this just yet to get some information from the auditor's office as to why they asked us to do it this way as opposed to the other ways we're anticipating. And then we can, I don't intend on moving on my legislation at first reading. I usually tend to give those 2 or 3 readings before we go forward, so we can kind of figure out the best way to do this with the auditor's office and then play catch up with these ordinances. Might be an idea.
All right, Ms. Rowland, can you just roll these into our next work session so that we can have further conversation and not have it on our agenda?
Yes, sir, I can.
Mr. Lewis, I don't.
Language?
Mr. Lewis, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Take the emergency language up.
Thank you, Ms. Rowland.
You're saying that we should take all of these general fund transfers in and out for the next work session? All of them or just the one?
The one that transfers out 60,000, the one that transfers in 60,000, and then the one that appropriates 60,000 to 1237, 845, 52392 service and contracts.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. What's this next? Oh, okay. This next one's another cleanup. It's please prepare legislation to make a transfer in the 2021 appropriation of the Shaw Castle West Fund. It's $56.90 to be transferred out and in, just like we've been talking about. This is another account that's been sitting in our balances for years, and we have not used it. Its original purpose has been fulfilled, and this is just a remaining balance. Are there any questions or discussion? I will give my verbal on both of these.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Yeah.
And there is no emergency language on either of those as well.
Okay.
This next one, request an appropriation from the unappropriated balance of the 1235 Community Health Services Fund, the amount of $50,000 to the grant expense account to pay salaries for our contact tracers for COVID-19 and other related purchases. Ms. Sargent, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Would you want to speak to this at all?
Sure. We need to take the money out of our community health, so our health department funds to put into our grant expense account. This is to pay our 2 contract tracers, our nurses, and overtime for clinics for now. And this will be 100% reimbursed by our 2 grants. The CT, which is Contact Tracing 21, and the CO 21 grant, which is the COVID grant. So they'd be 100% reimbursed.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
For this next one, is Mr. Pedro on the line?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Proposed legislation to appropriate $45,000 from the 1234 Parks and Rec Fund, placing $40,000 to the Legends Golf contract line, $5,000 to Legends Pro Shop, and this is for supplies and do capital improvements in the spring. And this was approved by the Park Board, correct, Mr. Pedro?
Yes, sir. We are asking to appropriate this money now so we can schedule some, more than anything, bunker renovations. And as you can see, the Legends Pro Shop, once Kerry gets going down there, that's going to be depleted pretty well if we have another good year like we did last year. And this money is coming out of the Legends carryover money.
Thank you. And how many bunkers are you going to be looking to work on?
It just depends on the sizes. Usually every year, the last few years, we've been going 5 or 6. I talked to the superintendent today, and we might do a couple. It might just be 2, but we have some very large bunkers. We have 3 or 4 that are probably close to 70 or 80 yards long, and those might be on the list. We're working on that probably over the next few weeks on which ones to be exact.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Next one is please prepare legislation to accept the State of Ohio Small Business Relief Funding Grant for $2,500 for Legends Food and Beverage. Mr. Pedro.
Yes, this came as kind of a surprise. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, we found out on WHBC.com was offering the information on this grant for the Small Business Relief Fund. So we applied for it for food and beverage at Legends, and within a week we received a check. So it's nice to get grants like that.
Any questions or discussion? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
All right, the next one is please prepare legislation authorizing the law director to enter into contract with the Village of Navarre for a Massillon Law Department to provide prosecutorial and legal services to the Village of Navarre. This contract will provide us with $14,000 of compensation. Mr. Richard, do you have anything you want to add?
I'll just add both of these next 2 pieces. It's a combined $16,300. It's similar legislation to what we passed recently. It's with my department picking up a little extra work to bring in extra money for our city.
Did you say 16,000 combined?
26.3. Sorry.
Yes.
That's why I went to law school.
Ms. Littman.
Yes, I do have a question. I know that these are contracts that we typically look at every year. And I noticed that this contract as well appears to have ended December 31st of 2020. And then the new one starts the beginning of the year. Is there any language that we could add to these contracts that they should run over on a month-to-month basis? I mean, we are at the end of February with a prior contract that ended December 31st of 2020. I guess I'm just looking at to not be in non-compliance with these contracts as we are, I'm sure, still providing the prosecutorial services and legal services to these entities.
It was part of our verbal agreement. If we ever, with the exception of one party giving the other party notice that we would move into a month-to-month that would be prorated, that is just a concept of exterior evidence brought into our 4 letters of the contract. But essentially, we're going to work on getting them, with hopefully Councilwoman Littman, we're going to work on getting these out to the villages earlier. They seem to lag. Their council doesn't meet as often as ours does. So I'm going to try to get them out in late October next year so we don't have this issue. But obviously it is mid to late February now, and we've just been ultimately working on a month-to-month. But it is something that we're certainly aware of, and we'd like to stick within the bounds of the written contract as much as we can.
Thank you.
I'll give my verbal on both of these.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal on both as well.
Thank you.
All right. That is all the new we have tonight. I don't believe I have anything else. Ms. President Eisnick, do you have anything that you wanted to discuss this evening?
I do not, unless Mr. Maley, would it be appropriate to ask him what's happening with our Kmart building?
Absolutely. Mr. Maley?
Give you a quick update. We are working on a project for the Kmart building. I don't have all the specifics to share with you, but stay tuned. We will be bringing you some information soon, but we are working on a project currently.
Thank you. I had some people I work with ask me what was going on, and I said I would try to find out. Thank you.
Ms. Littman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I am also wondering what is going on with the lighting on State Route 21 and Walnut Road. It looks like lights have been taken out on 21 altogether, and there are only then stoplights in the cross of a Walnut Road there. Can Mr. Maley comment on what's occurring there?
Actually, Barb Sylvester will be able to comment on that. We did have an accident there, and she'll give you an update on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, on Monday, last Monday, a week ago today, we did have an accident there. There was a truck that left the bed of his truck actually opened in air and came up Walnut Road there, knocked off some of the wires there from about 1st Street, got up to Walnut and turned right onto 21 and completely took out the light post there. Took all 3 traffic lights off of there. The post is damaged so severe that we're not able to repurpose it to get it back up. It is one of those special mast arm poles that is in a few places in the city. It's 55 feet long. They're not readily available. Unfortunately, there's not many of them that are even manufactured in the United States. It's been a project that between engineering and street department and myself have been working on all week. We do have a solution right now. We do have a new mast arm on order, but the delivery time on that is between 6 to 8 weeks. But with other poles that we've ordered in the city, we know that it's taking about 3 months. So we did come up with a temporary solution that we know is still safe and is going to take care of the problem there. And we just finalized things on that today with a construction vendor to help us and located a pole. And they should have the project completed hopefully by Thursday of this week. Everything that I've set up right now, as you notice, is all safe. It is all set up in a way to detour traffic, to keep people from that area. We've blocked off for no left turns there, of course, because, again, of high risk. Making those types of turns without the lights there. The lights, the traffic signals themselves are working the way that they should be when there is a problem, and that is blinking red one way and blinking yellow the other way. And we set it up that way for 21 to be the yellow blinking and Walnut to be the red blinking. So we have paid close attention to that, worked also with our police department also, making them aware of everything that's going on in that area. So it has been a project and a concern of ours, but as I said, we should have the temporary fix there until we get the permanent pole back in. But unfortunately, an accident that, you know, none of us really would have thought would have ever happened, that something could completely take out that pole, but it was an accident by a truck driver that left the bed of his truck completely in the upright position.
Thank you, Mrs. Sylvester.
You're welcome.
All right. At this point, we will open the meeting up to public comment. We do ask that you please keep all your comments to 3 minutes or less. State your name and address prior to speaking. If one person starts to speak, please let them have the floor, and we'll try to get you next.
This is the mayor. Council has asked us to have the chief discuss and answer any questions concerning the canine officer.
Oh, yes.
He's on the line now, so I just wanted to remind you of that.
I do apologize, our public, if you could just hold on for a few more minutes and we'll let the chief of police address council. Chief Moser, please.
Well, there's really not a whole lot to announce on this so far. The first dog has completed its training, gotten its certification, and it's currently on the road with us right now. Patrolman Crabtree is the handler, and everything seems to be going real well with that right now. The second handler has not been determined yet, but it will be in the next couple days. The training for the second canine will be starting on March 1st. And we have everything else kind of falling into place. The second canine cruiser, we're still waiting on some equipment, so it won't be ready on time, but we will make do because hopefully by the time it completes its certification, the car will be ready.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Living?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Chief Mosier, have the canines been named at all? I know it seems trivial, but I've been asked. There was, of course, a predecessor canine that was quite the community canine. So they've asked me as their names that you've already applied to these police dogs.
Well, the dogs are named prior to us receiving them. Louise, Luiz, is the canine that's already been certified with us. We don't know the second canine at this point. We'll be finding that out here shortly.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you very much. All right, at this point, we will have our public speaks. Again, remember, try to keep your comments under 3 minutes or less. State your name and address for the record. If you hear someone else speak, please let them continue speaking. But I do know I see Joni has raised her hand, so go right ahead, Joni.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. And I appreciate you explaining to me that we had to wait till the end to talk because I work in the public sector too, so I know what it's like. I think that the city is already punishing the landlords by making them pay a one-time $50 fee because they're not making the people that live in their home pay that fee. You say that there's between 1,800 and 1,900 properties that are unregistered. That's approximately $95,000. I think you need to focus on collecting those fees from those people that are not paying, although I still don't believe that there should be a fee to the landlords because there are other revenues for the city to find out who owns a property. Properties are registered with the Stark County Auditor. So all you can do, you can go right to their site, look up, see who owns a property, see their tax mailing address. I think, and like you had said, Mr. Lewis, in the newspaper, I think it is a money grab from the city. And I think it's discrimination against the people that own more than one property. Whatever happened to everyone should be created equal. People are not created equal when you target a specific homeowners and charge them a fee because they own more than one property. You know, you're not charging, like I said, the regular homeowners that live in the property. Because there's a lot of homeowners that live in their house that don't take care of it. So again, I think it's discrimination against the good landlords who take care of their properties. If someone isn't taking care of their property and there's a violation, the city needs to go in, clean it up, and assess the property taxes for the cost of the cleanup. Not charge others who don't have rundown properties. We should not have to pay for them. If someone has a nuisance on their property, you should hold a meeting. If the owner doesn't clean up, like I said, the township does it. It's assessed to the property taxes. Not every landlord should have to pay a fee for that, for the bad owners. It's not the responsibility for other people to take care of the bad people's properties. Over the years, I purchased 3 properties in the city of Massillon that were run down. We renovated them, made them look very nice, which improved the area, the neighborhood, gave people a nice place to live, and brought income tax to the city by having people live there. And you know what we got out of it? Higher taxes and having to pay a $50 fee. Now to pay an $80 fee, I don't know what that's for. It shouldn't be for us to take care of other people's properties. We already pay a lot of taxes to the city. Again, if we improve our property, we get penalized because we have to pay more taxes. But people that let their properties go downhill, their taxes are really low, so they don't have to pay much taxes. You know, townships have the right way to do it. Like I said, they hold a nuisance hearing on the property. They assess the property taxes for it. I think that's something that you need to look at doing. And again, Mr. Lewis, I really appreciate the comments you had in the newspaper. I agree with you. I think it's a money grab, and I don't think the landlords, the good landlords, should be penalized an unnecessary cost, because it's not fair that we get nickeled and dimed to death for the bad people that don't take care of things. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. I'm sorry you were muted.
Got me. Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yeah, it's Joni Poindexter. My address is 1076 Roseland Avenue, Northwest Massillon, 44647.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Ozer, I see your hand is up.
Hey there, guys. How are you? Andrew Oser, 901 Bird Avenue, Massillon here. Just wanted to echo a few sentiments here that, I completely understand as a landlord myself, the purposes of why you guys want to do this. And it's completely understandable. I think the way you guys are going about it is wrong. One, for those of us that own multifamily properties, I feel like you're being, penalized per unit on that one, which definitely isn't to scale or appropriate. I have no problem registering properties. I guess my issue is that, again, I feel like we're being penalized. Last year, I bought 4 properties in town that were definitely, without question, blighted properties. I improved them. They're all renovated above and beyond what many would do. I've got great tenants in them. And then you guys want to hit me. Sorry about that. I don't know where that cut off. You guys want to hit me again for higher taxes than a registration fee. I wouldn't be opposed to something like a landlord license of some kind, where it was done on a staggered value, where, hey, I give you the list of the properties and you say, hey, let's abide by these rules, kind of a contract between landlord and city on a staggered basis. Oh, goodness. Anyway, appreciate the time.
Mr. Ozer, did you state your address?
I did, but for the record, 901 Bird Avenue, Massillon.
Thank you. Ms. Hopkins, did I see that you wanted to speak as well?
Members of council, thank you so much for allowing me to sit in with your meeting today. My name is Amy Hopkins, and I am the new External Affairs Representative for Ohio Edison First Energy, and I am serving the City of Massillon, so I just wanted to introduce myself to you all.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Herrenking, did you have anything? I know you invited her tonight. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, and I will not admit that I apologize that Amy was scheduled to be on the call tonight, and I should have asked you that we do this at the beginning of the meeting. But no, Amy is the new External Affairs Director here in Massillon. She's out of the South Erie office. Met with her recently. She's going to be our point of contact for First Energy. Again, I apologize for not mentioning that earlier. But I guess this is just to get a name and a face to Amy. She can reach out, or we can all reach out to her with any of our kind of constituent concerns or things like that. So I appreciate her being on the line tonight.
Thank you.
Ms. Flipman?
Yes, Amy, this is Linda Littman. I'm the council person for Ward 6. we've had some issues with lines out in our Lanedale, Westbrook Estates allotments. And we have been able to have some attention given to some of those lines. I guess I just wanted to make sure that you would be the person that we're contacting. I think Laura Tubo was previously. Would you be able to provide your contact information to council either through Diane or even currently here on this call, just so that we know how to get a hold of you, how to reach you, whether it's by telephone, by text, or how it's best to communicate with you?
Sure. Yes, I will be your point of contact. Please call me and I will work with the line department to get things taken care of. My cell phone number, and I did take over for Laura Tubo, so I have the exact same phone number. I don't know if you still have her number.
I do.
So it's the 440-417-8461. And please feel free to text me, call me. I am here to serve.
Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak during the public speak section? All right, seeing none, that'll conclude business this evening, and we will meet again next Monday. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, Diane.
Good night, everyone.